How do you actually balance the challenges that marketers face for short-term delivery of key metrics versus the long-term need to protect and build the brand? Start with Alan here.
There's only one answer to that, and it's the long-term need to protect and build the brand. Because the problem with short-termism is that's all you get. You know, if you think in the short, and unfortunately the human brain seems to always be geared to thinking short-term. It's the major business figures, you know, of the last 50 years in marketing who have been brave enough to not kind of think about the 90-day world and think about the 90-year world, who have succeeded in building remarkable brands.
It's a really good question. You said, how do you reconcile short-term with brand equity, short-term revenue gain with brand equity? The way you do that is you place a monetary value on brand equity. If you can do that, then you are using the same currency, literally, to look at the short-term and the long-term. So you've got to monetize what the brand equity is worth to you. And part of the problem that businesses face, and Alan, you referred to this, is because we've got year-end pressures. So they cut the budget to make the Q4 look great and the P&L balance. Is that in the interest of the shareholder? It might be in the interest of the managing director and the finance director, but is that genuinely in the interest of the shareholder? And I think there's an interesting dichotomy here in business where remuneration or numeration of businesses by management doesn't necessarily reflect the best interest of shareholders. It's a big question.
I agree.
Sorry, Alan?
I think if you look at Apple as a case in point, I mean, a lot of Apple's marketing actually isn't in communications, it's in packaging, it's in all of those things. And if you look at the way that they changed under Steve Jobs when he came back to the organization, he didn't act in the way that shareholders would have been delighted about in the short term, but they all benefited enormously from his long-term vision, whereas his predecessor was always thinking about the shareholder, and what happened? The stock price went down, because it was all about now, today, 90 days.
What do the panel think of the challenge of, or the pressures of over-optimizing on the short term in terms of delivery, particularly on the volume side?
Well, I've seen a lot of direct response advertising that's invisible to the consumer. I think a lot of advertisers who used to go with a classic direct response where it was all about optimizing the immediate return ended up changing to a more brand response type of activity because they're realizing that you had to get on the shopping list to begin with, and that was a more expensive endeavor, but ultimately a more profitable endeavor when you look at the long-term effect. So I think there's a huge danger in over-optimizing something and saying these particular media don't return today, so they're coming off the schedule. And then what happens is you have a really efficient-looking spreadsheet, but your revenue, which is back to the point we spoke about earlier on, this is not about return on investment in a ratio terms, it's about actually financial contribution. And we've got to think in both terms in relation to what's the immediate response, but more importantly, what's the long-term gain?
Right, I think we're at the timeline, which we said we would finish on. So I do want to thank the panel. I think it's been a really interesting discussion, and I think it's an area that's provoked a lot of interest. One of the things I've learned is that it's not easy, but it's certainly necessary. So once again, many thanks to my fellow panelists. Thank you.